Hey guys, and welcome back to my TCG Dev Diary. This is going to be episode 2. If you caught me last time, I kind of talked through the basic premise of my game Spellpatch and showed off my first fully illustrated card, which was this guy, the Stonehorn Initiate. In this video, I'm going to take you guys behind the scenes into my full card illustration process. How I go from like a very basic sketch into a fully fleshed out, polished illustration, as well as what goes into designing a good frame for a TCG, and how I've gone from this to this. So let's get into it. When I started thinking about what the first card in Spellpatch was going to be, I knew I wanted something that would really capture the tone of the insect faction. And I had this idea to base the first starter deck around this army of beetle warriors called the Stonehorns. Now, in my head, these guys would become the first archetype for Spellpatch, so I thought it would be fun to start with like a low-level recruit, a small, nervous familiar who's still finding his footing, and a card that could enable some early play synergy, able to replace himself with a stronger card once he leaves the field. So with my initial thoughts jotted down, I jumped straight into sketching. I knew I wanted to base this guy off of a beetle grub, so I started with a page of doodles. Now these are always just quick 1 to 2 minute digital sketches where I can mess around with different shapes and see what kind of personality starts to come through for each character. The first couple of variants were a little too goofy and didn't really look like they would put up much of a fight. I still wanted this guy to be cute, but like he could actually deal some damage. And this is the version I ended up with after a lot of back and forth. Now, I was really excited to get this guy fully fleshed out, and I think his acorn hat is a nice touch, kind of like a military beret. Next up is Nomad Sculpt. So I'm starting off here with my reference image and using some basic tools like the move, inflate, and smooth brushes to sort of push this sphere around and block in the basic shapes for the head. I'm pretty new to this particular 3D sculpting process, so it's a lot of back and forth at this stage, just making small changes and then sort of checking the sketch to see if I'm getting the shapes that I want. Now, a tip for you guys, if you ever want to give 3D sculpting a go for yourselves, is to always have the symmetry enabled. So this way you've only got to sculpt one side of the character, which effectively saves you half the time. After finishing the basic sculpt for this guy, I took him to Blender to do some simple rigging so that I could pose him for the finished card art. Now, if you're not sure what rigging is, it's effectively just like adding a skeleton to the 3D mesh so that we can pose the character into any position that we really want. After going through this process though, I probably wouldn't do this again, unless it's a character that I plan to use across a lot of illustrations. I should have just sculpted him into his finished pose and saved myself a bit of time here. Still though, it's a good option if you're not sure what you want your character's final pose to be, and I'll drop a link to the tutorial I followed in the description. So now that he's posed the way I want, I brought him back into Nomad to finish up the 3D part of this whole process. Unfortunately, I kind of forgot to capture a lot of the work here, but let's just take a look at the finished file to see where I ended up. For the environment, I usually place in some basic planes and just use the stamp brush tool to add in all these rocky details, and the vines were just imported from a foliage asset pack that I bought quite a while ago. I also decided to add this little tree hopper guy sitting on the rock in front of the main character, and this was generally just to add a bit of narrative interest to the piece. Like maybe he's startled our Stonehorn Initiate, or maybe the Stonehorn Initiate takes his job so seriously that he sees even this little guy as a threat. Okay, so for colour, I'm experimenting with a new technique here, and I hope this is going to give each faction some visual distinction from one another. So for the insect cards, they're all going to start off with this green base material, which will hopefully then come through in the final illustrations. This is actually inspired by like an old oil painting technique called grige. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but it's where artists would first paint everything in like one neutral color before laying on different hues afterwards. And I'm hoping this will add to that unique look for all of my finished card art. And lastly, I just set up some basic lighting and then rendered the image out to Procreate for the paint over. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, this isn't really the most exciting time lapse, but a lot of what I'm doing here is just painting in extra layers of color and messing with the layer styles to achieve the look that I want. Once I'm happy with the color scheme though, then I go in and start having fun with all the extra little details, painting out the background, darkening and lightening certain areas, and fully fleshing out the scene. Okay, so now that the art's done, let's talk frame design. And if I'm being totally honest, yeah, this one turned into like a huge roadblock for this project. So frame design for a TCG is like a super clutch element in my opinion, and I think it's one that can really make or break your game. So not only have they got to look great, they've also got to convey all of this really important information about your card itself. And they've got to do all of this on super small print area. If you think about like the classic size for a card, it's not a lot of space to get a whole lot of information. So I ended up turning to one of my old favorites for a little bit of inspo. Now, Magic, in my opinion, gets a lot right, but also a lot wrong. And the areas that I want to improve on for my own game are, number 1, make more room for the card artwork itself. Number 2, figure out a way to reduce the word count for my card's abilities. And number 3, make sure as much of the important card info can be seen with the cards in hand. So with all of that in mind, here's the template I ended up with. At the top, we've got space for the card name, as well as its type, subtype, and level indicator. Heaps of space in the middle of the card to show off the artwork. Now the text box I thought could be cool to do as this like book-shaped frame, and I made the decision to separate each card's rule text by having a smaller frame to indicate the ability trigger, and I'm really happy with this aspect as it cuts out a lot of unnecessary text inside of the frame while being clear to players, I hope. Each familiar is also going to need to have a power value it uses to deal damage and a guard value it uses to defend with, and I've placed those on the other side of the trigger frame to help balance this out. Lastly, right at the bottom, I've got space for things like a collector number, set name, a faction symbol, art credit, and copyright. And with the cards fanned in hand, I think I've managed to have the most important info readable at a glance. Now with my template figured out, it was time to make it look as much a part of the world as Spellpatch as the card art. My main goals here were to treat the design of the frame as an illustration itself, getting the balance between detail and readability right. One thing that came up when I was researching card frames was that a lot of newer TCGs have been leaning into a more minimalistic or sort of streamlined look. And while I think there's nothing wrong with that, like it's great for those games, it's really not the direction that I want to go with for my own. So as you can see on my mood board, a lot of inspiration ended up coming from these like old ironwork garden gates with these really beautiful details, and I knew this was an element that I had to incorporate. So I got to work in Blender to come up with some decorations for my frame. So here's what I ended up using. I patchworked together some of these nature-inspired motifs I sculpted to create a frame where the card art could sit, and then created some simple scrolls and frames using curves to create a backdrop for the card text. While I was at it, I also sculpted up this little insect symbol I could use to give this first card a faction indicator. And after combining all these separate elements, here's what I ended up with. I hope you stuck around through all that yapping, because I'm really happy with how this card frame turned out. So I think I've managed to balance the design with the aesthetics that I was originally going for, but also without feeling like too overcrowded or overdone. I even added in this colored gradient in the background to help distinguish which faction each card would belong to. I even printed out a couple of these at scale just so I could check the readability at size, and I think it looks pretty good to me. I'll hold it up. I don't know if it's gonna focus, but hopefully you guys can see that. So it's really cool to be able to hold this guy fully finished. All the illustration done, the card frame, the rules text. It's a really good feeling, and it's given me a huge boost of motivation to get onto the next card. Speaking of which, in the next video, I want to introduce the next card type for Spellpatch to you guys, and they're going to be called Invocations. Now I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. If you've got any suggestions or if there's anything you're eager to see, please let me know. And also, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, hitting the bell icon, dropping this video a like, it'll be a huge help for a small growing channel like me. So bye for now, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.